The promenade, the people walking, the people talking, facade.
The biggest harms come from the fact that drugs are illegal. People who use drugs are treated is terrible. The way they're stigmatized and marginalized, especially if you inject drugs, is terrible. It's wrong, you know, it's wrong. And I'm not that stupid. And I refuse to believe that this is the correct way that people should be forced to live. So that's what kind of got me into thinking this way. And I was a teacher. Then one day in the staff room, I saw an advert for a job for what's it called? Drug misuse education coordinator. So I got this job, and that was the start of my journey to where I am now, to where I am today. I got the job. I met very, very nice people who thought the way I thought, and we kind of conspired, and we kind of turned the whole thing on its head and made sure that the approach we made was not just say no. I used to talk to the kids about it, you know, and the things I used to tell them was, please don't do this on your own. Don't go to the canal bank, which is where they used to go, and do this on your own. Go with someone. So that's another harm reduction thing. Go with someone. Don't go to the canal. Don't go by railway lines. Dangerous. So they don't, you know, so the kids went to other places. For me to say to them, stop it, waste of time. So for me, the thing to do was to stop them harming themselves. And I didn't know it was called harm reduction. I don't think it was at the time, but that was the approach. Then I got a job at the Merseyside Drug Training Information. I was headhunted to be the director of this agency, which was an information agency, information, anyone could come in, could come in off the street, anyone, literally, police, parents, people who use drugs, anyone could come in and get information. The whole thing was a big success, giving out needles and syringes. A lot of people were against it. We got a lot of criticism. Actually, what happened was the people of Liverpool kind of suddenly realized they were doing something that was world beating. It was leading the world. This little agency in Liverpool, we were leading the world. We were teaching the world to sing, basically, about drugs and drug use, the harm reduction. People from everywhere came. So we decided, oh my God, we have to have a conference. The next one is the 27th issue of that conference that I started. You cannot save everyone with public health measures. It's not possible. You can't save people from themselves. Sometimes you just can't, you know. But I mean, in Liverpool, the rate of HIV amongst injecting drug users, in the words of the Qutb Syed, who was the regional epidemiologist, he said it's not measurable. So low, not measurable. The rate in Manchester, which didn't do what we did in Liverpool, was 18%. The rate in Edinburgh, which also didn't do what we did, was 80%. 80% of people who injected drugs were HIV positive. You spend an hour trying to persuade someone to stop using heroin. In that hour, you could have given needles out to 100 people who needed them, you know what I mean? Who would use these needles to stop themselves getting HIV and dying. When I was working at HIT and had some face-to-face contact with people who use drugs. The idea that we would kind of say to them, oh, you've got to keep on doing this, you can't, it was ridiculous. And what used to happen was people used to say, I'm fed up doing this, I'm fed up. So we could just take them across the parking lot to someone to talk to them about rehab or whatever they wanted, you know what I mean? We got vilified as people who didn't want people to recover, We've always thought that drugs should be legalized. We've always thought that the reason for all the harms is that they're not legal, they're not sanctioned, people have to buy them off criminals, they don't know what's in it, they're shooting up, all that stuff is because these things are illegal. Some people want to use drugs, that's it, and you can do everything in the world to stop them. You can't, and why would you? The best way to do it is to make sure they keep safe, make sure they do it properly. And one thing we have to be clear about is that the war on drugs is not a war on drugs. It's a war on people. And it's especially a war on Black people. The penalty for crack, which is just cocaine, is still more than the penalty for possession of cocaine, because crack is an African-American issue. White powder cocaine is a middle class yuppies, we used to call them, issue. I have one fear that if we decriminalize, we will be epochs before we get legalized. I think that's one of the problems. Look, we've given you this, now go away, kind of. And it's an absolute mess what they've done. You still have to buy your drugs on the streets from criminals. I mean, this is like crazy. And it's kind of like, you're only allowed to have a certain amount of whatever your drug is. There are prescribed amounts. There's no prescribed amounts for alcohol. You can go and buy 50 cans of alcohol and take it home if you want. There's no prescribed amounts for cigarettes. It's just for the illegal drugs. And as I say, you have to buy them on the street. So it's kind of tolerated. But in theory, you can still be arrested by the police. The police still have the power to arrest people. And when people are arrested, they're taken to this committee called a dissuasion committee. If you're going to decriminalize, and don't have people getting arrested and taken to a dissuasion committee rather than taken to a court or something. It's like it's not even a decriminalisation. It's not. Unfortunately, it's going to be the model, I think. It'll be the model if it happens. They'll always want this idea that there's something wrong with it. If you are transgressing in some way by using these drugs rather than using nicotine and alcohol. One of the interesting things is the Netherlands. The Netherlands haven't decriminalized, they haven't legalized, they've tolerated. The Dutch have this concept of toleration. They tolerate something. So they tolerate the use of cannabis. So, you can go shops, cafes, everywhere. So I was able to use them as an example of the success of decriminalization. Lifetime cannabis use of an American between the ages of, I think, 17 and 25, more or less, was 8%. Okay. Lifetime cannabis use in the Netherlands, the same age group, was 4%. So in a country where oppression is the tool, where putting people in jail is the tool, was the lifetime use of cannabis amongst that age group was twice what it was in a country where you could go and sit in the street and smoke weed if you wanted, It's like those kinds of things you know, stark examples of what's wrong with prohibition. You know what would happen if drugs were legalized tomorrow? Millions of people would lose their jobs. Millions. The drug control industry gone. The DEA gone. All the anti-drug programs gone. All of those things gone if we live. And with those things goes jobs. Their jobs go as well. So the vested interests here are enormous. The question I always ask people who don't agree with me is, let's have a look at cigarettes and tobacco. And when you say to them, we're talking about the two most dangerous drugs, they agree. They say, oh yeah. And they're legal. The two most dangerous drugs are legal. And what I'm talking to you about is other drugs that are not as dangerous as those becoming legal and being regulated.